Hi, I'm Anthony Suarez, former professor, legislator, and your host of I Need to Know, a program of the Public Trust Network dedicated to the concept and principle of teaching you about the law and politics at crossroads between the two. And today, our guest is Professor Pat Broussard of Florida A&M University of Law. Stay with us. Professor, thank you for joining me on I Need to Know. And please, can you describe a little bit about your job, where you teach, and the topic that you teach at the law school?
Well, hello, and thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it. I'm always amazed that people think I have something to say of significance, so I really appreciate this. I'm a professor of law, as you said, at the Florida A&M University College of Law. I've been there for 18 years, starting on my 19th year, and I teach Constitutional Law 1, Constitutional Law 2, First Amendment, and a course called Women in the Law, but I've taught across the whole spectrum of a bunch of different things. My writing, my scholarship is based on, I have a specialty in female genital mutilation because that's something that is very dear to my heart, to getting the word out. But in addition to that, just rights, civil rights, human rights, voting rights. I have written on all of that. So I don't know if I would consider myself an expert, but I have written on it. I am enamored by the subject matter. And I believe fiercely in my heart that me being a lawyer, coming from the background that I've come from, growing up in the poverty that I grew up in, I have a moral obligation to spread the word.
And thank you once again, because we're going to be participating in an upcoming conference of what we call the National Puerto Rican Bar Association Conference. And it is a consortium of different bar associations that have an emphasis on interest in Puerto Rico. And that is from Florida, Puerto Rico, the island itself, and Chicago, Illinois, have joined, along with the bar associations in New York, that is a Puerto Rican interest. I'm saying Puerto Rican lawyers are living in the States, but have an interest in it to create an ethnic bar, a voluntary bar that deals with the issues of Puerto Rico. And the question is why? And this conference is meant and designed to try to establish a national platform on the conversation of Puerto Rico. Because Puerto Rico, whether we like the word or don't like the word, is in fact a colony of the United States. It's not because I say so, it's because the United States Supreme Court has said in its decisions that Puerto Rico is a territory which is non-sovereign, doesn't have its own independence to dictate its own laws, and neither is it a state, so that the application of all the potential applications of 14th Amendment, equal protection, are not applicable to Puerto Rico. So this becomes a problem, because even if 100% of the Puerto Ricans wanted to become a state or wanted to become an independent nation, they cannot do so without the consent of Congress. And that means that unless you have a national discourse where the people from Iowa and Montana and California and all the rest of the states are involved, Puerto Rico will not be able to get out from under the situation that it's at. And since most of us do not believe that that is a fair situation and should be considered under our American model of what we perceive ourselves to be, that this has to be addressed. Now, the bar associations, I indicated to you off the record that none of the bar associations take an official position on whether Puerto Rico should be a state or an independent nation, because of the fact that we have different bar associations and different political views from within. But we do take a position that the current status is just not within the concept of what would be fair. And so therefore we have to bring the discourse. We have to educate the community, and we must educate non-Puerto Ricans who do have that power over Puerto Rico as to the issues. And hopefully that one day this issue will be, we understand it won't be today, it may not be tomorrow, it may be many years in the future. But we do know that under our American system, by having this kind of discourse, eventually the ball is moved. And I think that takes us into a good segue into the topic that you and I will be discussing during the conference, which is a political gerrymandering, because gerrymandering talks about that progression of the right to vote, over the years of history. So Professor, could you take us a little bit about, but precisely that history of gerrymandering? What is it? How does it apply? Why is it?
So so first you have to understand that states divide their state into districts in order for purposes of both state voting and for federal voting. And these voting districts traditionally have looked a certain way, right? They've been contiguous, meaning they've touched on each other, meaning there's some kind of method to the madness. And we're required to redistrict, I think it's every 10 years after the census, if it's necessary. And so therefore, what has happened, and this is not new, and that's what I want to emphasize to folks who are listening in. Gerrymandering is not a new concept. It's just that in the last 20, 30 years, it's become so egregious and so in your face that it has leapt into the forefront of American discourse. But gerrymandering, the term comes from, I think I read back in the day that the term came from a mayor of some northeastern city whose name was Jerry, and he redistricted for an election in such a way that the map he drew looked like a salamander. And so that's where the term gerrymandering came from. But basically what's happening in gerrymandering is the people who are drawing the map are drawing the voting map to their advantage, for their partisan advantage. And if that partisan advantage is relying upon race as the factor to do so, or if political affiliation is the reason it's done, depends on who's doing it. So gerrymandering, I think traditionally is looked at in two terms. The term, I didn't invent these terms, cracking and packing. And cracking is when you divide up people who have a like interest and who might want to join together to vote. You spread them out so they cannot vote for the candidate that they want. And the term packing refers to when you take a group of people that you know will vote a certain way. I think one demonstration of cracking, of course, is Florida. And one example of packing would be Texas, because you have a senator that always wins, even though there isn't a majority in this person's personal space. So gerrymandering is, very simply put, it's the act of designing and cutting out the voting districts in a state to favor a certain party.
Right. So just to reiterate, every 10 years you have to we do a census, and the Congress requires then by the states, who must determine what the congressional districts look like, and of course their own districts for the state legislatures. So as we talk about the federal district, which is a lot of litigation that comes out of the 1965 Civil Rights Act, but the litigation hurt because we have to redraw them, and all the districts are supposed to be equal in number of people, all right? And so if they're equal in number of people, depending how you draw the lines based in the neighborhood, you can have a salamander-like long district connecting all your people, and therefore you're guaranteeing yourself to get election. Or you could break up that salamander, cracking, and therefore guaranteeing that you could crack up the salamander and then divide it in, so that other person who may have an interest in that big district cannot get elected based on how you crack it up. Is it correct?
Absolutely. So it's all based upon the principle that each vote counts the same. It has the same weight. But with gerrymandering and with cracking and packing, each vote does not have the same weight. And in the past, what has happened is districts have been divided up so that maybe a district that has, let's just pick a number, 4,000 people in it, and then you have a district that maybe has 10,000 people in it. Well, those votes aren't equal then. They don't count the same. They don't weigh the same. So in addition to just cracking and packing, you have to look at population distribution. That's the point of doing it every 10 years when the census changes, and the assumption is the population either grows or it's diminished. And it's to give a weight to this notion that all votes are equal. But as we know with gerrymandering, just by the nature of what's happening, all votes are not equal. Because if you cannot vote en masse for a candidate of your choice, because half the people that would vote for this person are in this district and the other half are in another district, your vote is being diluted.
Right. And so among the things that, and we talked the word cracking and packing and persons of choice, what was discovered over the beginning litigation? This is where so much of the work of Dr. Martin Luther King and so many other civil rights activists. And by 1965, they had realized that in the Deep South, we had had a lot of what we call Jim Crow laws, which was prohibiting people of color from being able to even register to vote. And then when they did register to vote, they would either pack them and stack them into one place or another so that it would either eliminate the ability of people of color to vote for someone of their choice. So Dr. Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement came up with this 1965 Civil Rights Act, which set forth criteria what you could not do. Now, over the years, and we'll get to this in perhaps during the discussion in September. Over the years, the Supreme Court has been whittling down the access and the reach of the Civil Rights Act to the point where now many of the states that were previously prohibited from acting without prior approval now are free to start putting whatever restrictions they could into the law, make it more difficult, going back to the Jim Crow type of legislation. And now, as a result of that, I'm going to speculation of some of the stuff that conclusions of myself as reading the law. The result has been that going back to these districts, which are drawn based on preferences of those that are in power now, to maintain power now. Now, I invite you to make your comment on that if you think I am wrong or
Oh, absolutely not. I think it's Jim Crow 2.0. So what happened was, after the Civil War, when you gave Black men the right to vote, something phenomenal occurred, and that is they voted. And in voting, they elected people who looked like them to positions that were unthought of, right? And so as a result of that, Jim Crow grew and grew and grew and grew. And so gerrymandering, although it still continued, it wasn't necessary because all you had to do was lynch somebody on the town square in front of everybody and then nobody would vote. So there were all kind of other things put in place to prevent people from voting. Here in Florida, the Coe massacre that occurred, the lynching that occurred in front of the judge's house because the judge gave the person the right to register to vote. So you had all of these other things in place that kept people from voting. 3/4 of people who lived in certain southern states weren't even registered to vote before the Voting Rights Act and before the Civil Rights Act. So what happened when you had this act? You started leveling the playing field. And when you think about it, some states were majority Black. And they had the power to elect whoever they wanted to elect. And knowing that, the shenanigans began and ways to circumvent the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act sprang up immediately. And what we're seeing is, as I alluded to earlier, we're seeing all of this on steroids. And it's in your face now. I mean, it used to be a little bit more subtle, if you can call taking a test for the Constitution that says how many bubbles in a bar of soap. But it's really in your face right now. I mean, laws that say you can't give somebody water and they're standing in line for 4 hours to vote because you've closed all of the polls in their neighborhoods. So there's so many egregious things going within the state legislatures. And then when you have a Supreme Court that coddles and nullifies so much of the work that has been done in the last 40 or 50 years. It's daunting. It's challenging.
Yeah, it is very
I want
challenging. And then that's why I think that bringing this class, this workshop to our conference is important, because to understand that while Puerto Rico itself is a legacy of the Spanish-American War, at that time in the world, the powers were dividing up the smaller countries after they were bounty, and Puerto Rico was bounty of the Spanish-American War. The United States needed a coaling station in the Caribbean to maintain its Monroe Doctrine, and therefore Puerto Rico was a convenient place to have it. But those were people of color, and so making them a state was not something they wanted to do at that point. But when they wanted to start drafting them into the World War and World War One, immediately thereafter, they became citizens, but not a state, so they could be drafted and go off to fight in World War One, but could not enjoy all the benefits of every other American. So this is one way of how people were manipulated. There's no other word to use, but it happens even here in the States. We had a long history of restricting people rights to have full-fledged membership in the American experience. And so the Civil Rights Act was enacted, and gerrymandering, which was already a tool, as you previously stated, already a tool in the toolbox of politicians, became another way of enforcing the racial laws, what we call the Jim Crow laws, but in the ways to control a group of people who are trying to exert themselves by then creating these gerrymandered districts. We tried to fix that with the Civil Rights Act. Now the Civil Rights Act is being chipped away by this court, the Supreme Court. Now, whether you listen, you may think that I'm, oh, this guy's a progressive left-out liberal. I want you to know, at one time I was a registered Republican. Okay, so you understand, this is the facts. These are just facts. Now, when you come to our conference, you're free to discuss these issues with us, to join your ideas and discuss it. All discussion is free to enjoy and to learn. Our objective is to learn. Our objective is to teach to everyone else what we have learned in our scholarship of understanding the problem. And I have no problem having a conversation with somebody else who may think that the words that I used in my last discussion here are too broad or too progressive, or whatever words you might want to use to describe an attitude. I know there are people who disagree with me, and that's okay. Not a problem. I'm willing to discuss the facts, and there are always a good discussion of facts, but there are no alternative facts. They are just facts. Okay. So,
and it's so important that we have these conversations. It's so important that we educate each other. So just because I have some kind of quote unquote mastery in this area does not mean that I can't learn from each and every one of each and every individual that shows up for this conversation. We're here to exchange ideas. We're here to learn from each other. And we're here to debunk alternative facts and to say, no, here's the reality of it, good, bad, ugly, or otherwise, without making any kind of judgment. So I look forward to interacting with the audience to hear what they think, what they feel, and what they know, because one thing that I have found out is that the vast majority of us we're not educated. Even people with degrees, even lawyers, we're not educated. Someone said something, they stood up and they spoke up and they said something, and somebody replied, "Oh, that's just what all Mexicans think." And I was like, but he's Puerto Rican. Oh, well, that's what all Cubans think, but he's Puerto Rico. And you've decided that a Puerto Rican is a Cuban, is a Mexican. They're all interchangeable, and they're all trying to take everything away from us. So the opportunity to talk and exchange ideas is something I'm looking forward to.
I really look forward to this conversation as well. And I want you to know that this outreach is also meant for Puerto Ricans of second and third generation, because sometimes they leave the island, they come here and they integrate it, and then they forget that this injustice still exists. It cannot be forgotten. We must not forget. And we must also, to make, when I was a politician, I always used to say, the United States is not a location. The United States is an ideal. It's a concept. All right. Our founding fathers, when they said all men are created equal, knew when they wrote that document that wasn't so. But all our history and the amendments of our Constitution were meant to enhance and open up the franchise to get to where we want to be, where America is a growing concept. You know,
the way I like to put it is it's a work in progress. America is a work in progress, and the preamble to the Constitution is aspirational. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union. So the more perfect union is an ongoing quest. It's not a destination. We're not there yet. It's what we're moving towards, hopefully.
Well, thank you so much. Remember, for all of you who are listening, September 27th, 28th at Florida A&M Law School, we'll have the Puerto Rican Bar Association National Conference. And come and join us. If you're a lawyer, you have to pay because you're getting CLE credits. But otherwise, for everyone else, it's free. You come in to learn, have an opportunity to discuss. And by the way, Professor, you know that I don't know if you're familiar with a gentleman by the name of Franklin Williams, who was the trial attorney for the one of the four Claremont, the trial of the four young black men who were tried in Claremont. And so I was with him. I was a co-commissioner with him in New York. He was my mentor. And
Wow.
at lunchtime, or actually in the evening of Friday, we're commemorating a bust which I had made in his memory. This was back in the 1940s when a black man coming to Central Florida, Lake County in particular, to try a murder case against alleged four young black men who allegedly raped a white woman, which wasn't true. But imagine the circumstances that this man had to face as he came to Central Florida to try this case. It's a wonderful story. He's a wonderful mentor. I learned so much from him, and it's going to be my honor to donate to the school. I'm hoping that the school accepts as a donation his bust, Franklin Williams. Thank you so much, very much.
Thank you.
Hi. If you like this content, please like and subscribe below. You don't have to be a lawyer. Just like to know what they know and how they know it. This is your place. Puerto Ricans are citizens of the United States but cannot vote for president or Congress. And only with your help will this colonial status ever end, one way or another.